Picture this. The year is 110 AD. Rome just hit 1.2 million people, a number no city on Earth would touch again for over 1,000 years. Emperor Trajan sits at the peak of Roman power, running an empire of 70 million people across 3 continents. But forget the emperors. Forget the senators. What did an ordinary day actually feel like for the million people who weren't them? Historian Mary Beard puts it straight. Rome was not a city of marble. It was a city of people. Packed, noisy, and fighting for space. From before dawn to past midnight, here's what those people actually lived through. The sun isn't even up, but Rome already is. You're in an insula, a 6-story apartment block in the Sabura district, Rome's most jam-packed neighborhood. Archaeologists estimate the Sabura ran about 50,000 people per square kilometer, denser than modern Manhattan. Your room is on the 4th floor. No running water, no window, no kitchen, just a straw mattress and a clay oil lamp, if you can swing the cost of oil, which ran about 4 asses a liter, roughly a full day's pay for a laborer. The building creaks. Roman writer Juvenal complained that he lived in a city where we inhabit a Rome, supported for the most part by slender props. Augustus tried capping building heights at 70 feet. Nero knocked it down to 60 after the Great Fire of 64 AD. Landlords ignored both. Fires and collapses were just part of life. You take the stairs down carefully. Chamber pots got dumped from upper windows into the street. Roman law technically required a warning shout first, but nobody was checking. First stop, the public baths. Not just for hygiene, for staying plugged into Roman social life. Rome had over 900 public baths by 300 AD. The Baths of Trajan, built in 109 AD, spread across 11 hectares and could handle thousands at once. Entry cost 1 quadrans, the smallest coin in circulation, pocket change by any standard. Slaves, freedmen, shopkeepers, senators, all in the same water. That was the whole point. The Roman physician Galen wrote extensively about the health benefits of the bathing sequence. The tepidarium, warm room, the caldarium, hot steam room, and the frigidarium, cold plunge. Modern sports science calls this contrast therapy, alternating heat and cold to cut inflammation and boost circulation. Romans figured it out 2,000 years ago purely by feel. You grab a shave while you're there, razor blades being one of the few things Romans actually mass-produced. You hear gossip. Classicist Garrett Fagan described the baths as the Roman equivalent of the internet, where information, rumor, and news all move fastest. By mid-morning, you're at the Roman Forum, 2.5 acres that somehow served as the stock exchange, the courthouse, and the political center of the entire empire all at the same time. The second you walk in, the noise just hits you. Pliny the Younger wrote that the Forum was almost unbearably loud, and honestly that tracks, because everything happening there was happening out in the open. Court cases weren't held behind closed doors in some quiet building. They were right there in public. The Basilica Julia was running up to 4 separate trials at the same time with crowds packed in on all sides, cheering and jeering the lawyers like it was a sporting event. And here's something that catches most people off guard. Rome had no notaries, no public records office, no legal system in the way we'd recognize it today. If you signed a contract, you needed 7 citizen witnesses standing right there with you because your reputation was the only thing enforcing it. Your word and your name were literally all you had. You walk past the rostra, which is the big speaker's platform, right in the center of everything. It's covered in the bronze rams, stripped off enemy ships Rome defeated in battle. Mark Antony stood on that exact platform in 44 BC to give his funeral speech for Julius Caesar, and according to Suetonius, the crowd that showed up grieving left wanting blood. That one speech started a civil war within days. So now you're hungry. You head over to Trajan's Market, which is basically the ancient world's first shopping mall. It's a 6-story complex with over 150 shops built directly into the side of the Quirinal Hill. They finished it somewhere around 100 to 110 AD, and the thing that gets me about this place is how global it already was. You could walk in and buy fish that came in from Ostia just 15 miles away, or spices that had traveled all the way from India through Alexandria. There was garum everywhere, which was Rome's version of hot sauce. Basically a fermented fish sauce that Romans put on absolutely everything. Wine from Greece, silk from China. Rome was the center of a trade network that stretched from Scotland all the way to India, and everything eventually ended up here. You grab lunch at a thermopolium, which is just a fast food counter. Clay pots sunk into a marble bar kept warm by charcoal burning underneath. Nothing fancy. Just hot food you could grab and go. Archaeologists have found over 80 of these things in Pompeii alone, so you can imagine how many Rome had. And feeding a city this size was no small thing. Rome was pulling in around 400,000 tons of grain every single year, almost all of it shipped over from Egypt. To stop people from starving and to stop them from rioting, emperors gave out free grain every month to roughly 200,000 male citizens. Historian Paul Erdkamp called it the most ambitious food security program the ancient world ever attempted, and honestly, it's hard to argue with that. After lunch, you head to the Colosseum. It opened in 80 AD and somehow fit 50,000 people inside, and the engineering behind it is genuinely impressive, because it had 76 numbered entrances built specifically so the entire crowd could clear out in under 15 minutes. Modern stadium architects still look at that design today, a building nearly 2,000 years old, and it's still being used as a reference point. Seating was completely sorted by social rank. Senators got marble seats right at the front, equestrians directly behind them, regular citizens further up. Women and slaves were standing at the very back. Even at a place built for public entertainment, Rome never let you forget exactly where you stood in the pecking order. The day actually started way earlier, though. Since dawn, there had been animal hunts going on down in the arena. Lions, elephants, rhinos all brought in from different parts of the empire just for this. By the time afternoon rolls around, it's the main event: gladiators. Now, here's what most people get completely wrong about this. The majority of gladiators were not condemned criminals being thrown to their deaths. A lot of them chose this life. We actually know this because archaeologists have found real contracts carved in stone, where gladiators negotiated their prize money up front. The best fighters could earn the equivalent of several years' worth of average wages from a single bout. They were stars. There's a piece of graffiti on a wall in Pompeii that literally says, "Celadus the Thracian makes the girls sigh." These men had fan bases the way athletes do today. Historians put the death rate at about 1 in 5 per fight, which is obviously brutal, but it's nowhere near the every fight ends in death version that Hollywood has been selling for decades. The crowd got to vote on what happened to a fighter who went down. And that iconic thumbs up for mercy that everyone pictures? Historians now believe the actual mercy signal was a closed fist. The whole thumbs up thing is pretty much just a myth that never got corrected. When the sun starts going down, Rome basically becomes two completely different cities at the same time. If you have money, you go home to your domus, which is a private townhouse built around an open courtyard garden. Painted walls, mosaic floors, a proper dining room where you entertain guests. And Roman dinner parties had a specific rule about this: 9 people. That was the socially correct number. Not 8, not 10. 9. Apicius, who was basically Rome's most famous food writer, left behind 500 recipes, and that alone tells you that Roman food went a lot deeper than the bread and olives stereotype. If you don't have money, dinner looks very different. You have no kitchen, remember, or no stove either, because lighting a fire in a wooden apartment building wasn't just risky, it was basically guaranteed to kill people. So you're eating cold food from a street vendor. Or you're going to a tavern if your pride allows it. Juvenal wrote that the taverns in the Sabura were places where you risk your life along with your dinner, and he probably wasn't joking. Once it gets dark, the city gets dangerous fast. There are no streetlights anywhere, and there's no real police force either. The vigils were 7,000 men, but they were a fire brigade, not a crime unit. Juvenal again said, "Only a fool goes to bed without making a will first." That gives you a pretty clear picture of what nighttime Rome felt like. The wealthy moved around in litters carried by slaves, with armed guards walking right alongside them. Everyone else just took their chances on the street. And those delivery carts that were banned from the city during daylight hours, they all came out now. Oxen pulling massive loads of grain, marble and timber across cobblestones all through the night. The noise never stopped. Plutarch wrote that for most, Romans' nighttime was just as loud and chaotic as the middle of the day. You didn't sleep in Rome so much as you just waited for morning. That was 24 hours in ancient Rome. Not the marble and monuments version, the real one. A city of 1.2 million people with aqueducts delivering fresh water daily and human waste still running in the streets at the same time. Free grain for the poor and gladiators bleeding for the crowd on the same afternoon. Rome's contradictions weren't accidents. That tension was literally how they held a million strangers together in one place. And 2,000 years later, we're still building cities on that exact same blueprint. If you want to see more ancient cities reconstructed like this, hit subscribe because we're just getting started.